Freedom Fighters, I'm coming back at you with another Friday weekly wrap up. And we find ourselves here once again with them passing a new liberal funding bill for a Democrat NGO called the NED program, National Endowment for Democracy. Oh, well, now doesn't that sound sweet? I'm sure that's a rainbows and butterflies organization that's all, nothing but good and positivity. I'm sure there's no um, DEI programs or anti American stuff that they're passing along, whatever they do at this wonderful program of theirs. But, I've covered lots of omnibus bills and spending bills and, the debt ceiling and all these things. And I've covered several of them. And I always say, they come together and, pass their garbage and stab we the people in the back. And, I've talked about an analogy kind of how, they pass along the reins of power and it's theater and they all scratch each other's back here and there to, appease each other. Certain sides are in power at certain times. They know the pendulum's going to swing back and forth. And while a certain, group is in power, they still have to scratch the back of the other team a little bit because once again, they'll get in there and it's a back and forth thing that they play. But, I was thinking about it even further. Like I left off, or I was saying in my previous video, the same thing happens over and over again. And, when I close my eyes at night and I think about all this stuff, or, whenever sometimes I'll just constantly thinking and like wargaming and looking ahead in the future and thinking about all this stuff that's going on. And I'm like, it's almost like this is I basically came up with the recipe, right? I broke through the, like I said, Republicans, Democrats, all this thing, and once you break through the matrix and you can see, their playbook and their play style, you start to just read it, literally read it like a book, read it like code, like in the matrix. And I was going back and thinking about, like Bill Clinton administration and the Middle East wars and stuff going on in that time, Operation Desert Storm, and all the stuff going on in the Middle East and how it led to September 11th and then the Bush wars and all that stuff. And I'm not gonna go through the whole story in there again about that inside job and how Osama was a CIA bred asset and all these things. And you can get into other things about the gold being stolen at the World Trade Center and the wing of the Pentagon that got hit, most likely with a missile, not an airplane. But who knows? That's up in the air, and that's not really what this video is about. But the point I was getting into, and then then Obama continues the wars, and Trump gets in, and then Biden, and how it always just continues, right? And I've talked about this, how the agenda always moves forward regardless of what party or who's in office or who's in charge. And, I talked about it in that Tucker Carlson and Putin interview, where Putin said the same thing. And I think world leaders are starting to understand it too. He's like, I talked to Bill Clinton, I've talked to Bush, I've talked to all your presidents, and during their presidency, we've made deals or we've had talks in the office, and then all of a sudden the black suits come in and things change up, or they go back home and I get a phone call and the deals change, or they say they can no longer, stick to what they were talking about. And so you got Trump now, you know, we're, on the verge of World War III, at war with several countries. And, you hear all this stuff going down. Um, you've got the news with Greenland and all this, which now NATO allies are basically threatening war with America. France, Germany, I think the UK basically said if we, take Greenland, that they're gonna, have consequences and stuff like that, and say that even militarily that they might have to defend against the United States. So I wanted to get back to Greenland, but that's not really what the video topic or what I was talking about. What I mainly wanted to focus on, like I said, was the system they're playing. And I kind of looked at it as like a recipe, their playbook, and how I've seen how they've passed things off. It's basically a recipe for disaster. That's what it is, right? Anything that could go wrong, you just sprinkle in a little bit of government, and it can make it a lot worse. But it's a ruling elite cabal that has an agenda set forward of basically a world domination, the new world order. We've talked about it several times. Um, but the whole thing of how, you know, even like let's talk about more recent topics about Trump constantly talking about Biden as Sleepy Joe, and it's his war, right? He always says it's Ukraine and Russia. This is Sleepy Joe's war. If he didn't start this, this would have never happened under my presidency and all that. Yet he continues to fund it. Every time Zelensky shows up to the Oval Office, goes to the White House, he signs another multi-billion-dollar checks, and he even brags about, oh, the other administration sent pillows and blankets. I'm sending tanks. I'm sending missiles. So you're furthering the problem. You're actually throwing fuel on the fire, and getting it further, because that's truly the agenda. And he's playing off the, oh, it's Joe Biden's war and it's his fault and it's his doing. But then they get in office and do the same thing. And then looking forward here, because you always have to look forward. When Gavin Newsom gets in, and all this other stuff going on, setting Venezuela, invading Venezuela, creating a power vacuum in there now that's basically breaking off into civil war, the Iran revolution. We've talked about over and over. The whole world is on fire, and who knows what the outcome of all these events are going to be. And when all that stuff goes down, and then Gavin Newsom gets in, he's going to be saying the same playbook. Oh, well, this is Trump's war. And, we didn't tell him to do this. He's a maniac. He went in there and set the world on fire, and got into Venezuela, and Iran's ablaze, and all these countries. Yet he'll do the exact same thing. He'll continue the thing. He'll fund it. And, all this stuff goes through black budget, Pentagon, and, like CIA stuff anyway. All this stuff is funded. It's not even, even the debt ceilings and omnibus bills are theater. Because at the end of the day, whatever they want, they'll get. They print the money. They just make it up out of digital nonsense whenever they want, right? It's not the same for you and I, right? They have an unlimited credit card, and they just do as they please. Which why I said I wanted to get back to Greenland. I heard that they proposed buying it for like $700 billion and giving every citizen there $100,000, which is literal pennies. Right? Not to you and I understand, but to government. I mean, our debt, our spending, or what are we going in, like a trillion plus dollars a year? So they're not even willing, their market value for Greenland is essentially what we spend in a year. I would imagine it would even cost several $trillion, but we've talked about this, about, the fake dollar, and the the whole system, the Federal Reserve, and this whole banking cartel system that we're under, and how it's intended to be an inflating, um, depreciating asset, which is the US dollar. It's basically fake, it means nothing. And I've talked before about, the Louisiana Purchase and Alaska and stuff like that. How you buy them for, mere millions of dollars. And at the time, it's like market value. And they're like, oh, yeah, that sounds pretty good, millions of dollars. At the time when you're like, in the early 1900s or whatever. And you're like, yeah, this is a ton of money. But what they don't prepare for is the inflation, and that it's backed by nothing, right? So then they take the land, and the buyer or the seller who gets the money thinks, oh, now I'm rich, I got $12 million. Then you fast forward 80 to 100 years, and the minerals in the ground are worth trillions, right? The value of the actual property are worth way more. So the same thing when they're like, "Oh yeah, we'll give you 700 billion. Let's just bump it up for an easy trillion." Now, they say they don't want it for minerals and for assets and stuff like that. They want it for security. So again, what's our security worth, right? And $1 trillion is nothing. That's a drop in the bucket. But anyway, I wanted to get back to the point of the video was they're all playing the game, right? I've talked about it over and over. And isn't there another debt ceiling or omnibus bill coming up? I thought that last government shutdown, they extended it, and I believe it's supposed to start again at the end of January, maybe beginning of February. I can't even remember. But it's coming again, and just expect them to cave. Like I guess it was this 81 Republicans who signed on to give money to this liberal money laundering operation. That's what they all are, and they go to anti-American policies. They hate America, um, and that's basically what it is. And I've talked before about, Cash Patel and him, opening up new FBI buildings and giving them money. And so, the FBI building was actually built before it was already in process from Biden. And then they took over, they finished the renovations, and then he opened it up. But he's since, upped the pay and other money and avenues for them to get revenue and all these bills. And like I said, when this is all over, they're going to be handing this over to the Democrats, and the Democrats are going to go by the same playbook, and it just goes on and on and on. Like as my video with kick, I said kick the can down the road. That's basically what it is, and that's where we're headed for. um I want to talk about further World War III implications, and I'm coming at you this Friday morning, so I haven't heard of anything new popping off. But we could wake up any day to a Iran strike and regime change, and who knows what else. And this is obviously putting a lot of pressure on Russia and stuff like that. Who's even came out and said if this war goes on any longer. I believe this was one of Putin's advisors that say that they're honestly looking at just nuking Europe. So, let me know what you think about it. What's your analysis or, whatnot. But as always, the Republicans, everyone's going to go in their corner and cheer on, yeah, that's my guy. And, yeah, he did this and this guy. And, it's all theater where you and we the people, are the ones being played. We've talked about it. They're not playing by the same rules. And this is a video. This is what I'll get into next time. I'll see you on for the Manic Monday rant. And I had a video I was intending to do a while back, and some other big event came out. I've been shelving this video since New Year's. That was what I was originally going to do, and I think I did the New Year's video, or I think I was covering the the Venezuela capturing of Maduro. So I've been shelving this video for a couple weeks now, and I look forward to getting that to you. So as always, let me know what you think, what's going to happen. Are we being played? Republicans, Democrats, they're all on the same side. And a lot of people, I've been seeing tweets about that today. A lot of Republicans calling out, like, what are we doing? Why are we coming out here and supporting this? But again, man, that's part of the show. That's part of even the questioning of why they're doing it, and then talking about other people and saying, oh, these guys are traitors, they're rhinos, they're this, they're that. That's part of the show. They're all in it together. These aren't serious people. We've talked anyway, man. We are on our own. Nobody's coming to save us. So get right with God, because only God can save you. Freedom fighters out.